So far we have done الفعل الماضي first one, and the second one الفعل المضارع الفعل الماضي past tense, and then present tense and future tense. So past tense, we have seen past tense never start with ya. Ya will not come in the beginning of past tense. For example, sakata. Sakata. Sakata means silent. He silent. Sakata. Oh. For example, la'iba. La'iba, he played. Please, you can't have ya. You can't have ya. And same thing, you can't have sukoon in the middle of past tense. For example, la'iba, you can't say la'ab. La'ab is not the verb. La'iba. And then comes present tense and future tense. Future tense, normally we have seen that seen will come. For example, give me an example for future tense. Any example?
سيدرس.
سيدرس. أحسن. سيدرس. 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 So seen will come, and present tense يدرس. يدرس. So يدرس. يدرس. Okay, so 14 for past tense and 14 for present tense and future tense. Same thing. Seen you are going to add, or sofa. Sofa yadrusu, sayadrusu. And today we are going to see the tense for command. It's called al-amr. Amr means command. When you want to command, that how you are going to command. It has 6 forms. For example, let's say darasa, darasa past tense, and then comes yadrusu, yadrusu, yadrusu. He studied, or he is studying, or he will study. Okay? Darasa yadrusu. You can add many. Sakata yaskutu, fataha yaftahu, la'iba yal'abu. Now, we want to see the amr. It's called al-amr. 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 And how you are going to make and how you are going to form tense for amr. For example, yadrusu. He is studying. And what about you are studying? Anta, I want to say that you are studying.
تدرس.
Tadrus. Yes, ta will come. Instead of ta, ya, ta will come. And this is for masculine. Tadrusu. Instead of ya, ta will come. Tadrusu. Tadrusu. A simple way to make it from tadrusu. For example, you are going to drop the ta. From tadrusu, you will drop the ta. So what remains? durus. So durus. So dal is sakin. So alif will come in the beginning. And then you are going to see the second letter. If second letter is madhmum, madhmum means with dhamma. So ra has a dhamma, ra has u. Alif will have dhamma. Udrus, udrus, udrus. So from always to make form amr, always, because amr you are saying you do it, you eat, you read, you sit. So always it will form from tadrus. Ta will drop, and then you are going to see the remaining letter are three, and you are going to see the second letter. If second letter has madhmu means a dhamma, alif will come in the beginning and alif will have dhamma. Udrus. For one. Udrus, you study. Udrus, you study. And then come for dual. For example, udrus, and then comes udrusa. Udrus, udrusa, and then udrusu. Udrusa, udrusu, udrus. So udrus. Sorry. C is going to be saki. Udrus, udrusa, udrusu. Is this okay? Give me any example for these three. For example, you want to say to me, sit down, or just sit. Why? What is the for present tense? Jalasa yajlisu. Jalasa yajlisu. So it's going to be tajlisu. So ta is going to be drop. And what is the second letter what? Remain jalas, three letter remain. Jalasa. And what is second letter what? Kasra. So alif will have kasra. Ijlis. Ijlis. Always. We are talking about how you are going to form for amr, for command. So we have seen past tense, present tense and future tense. Now today the tense for command is called amr. It says amr. So ijlis, it will come ijlis. Okay, make amr a simple one. For example, simple one is, for example, from yadrib, from tadrib, from tadribu. The idea is for command always you are going to see, because command is the one who is present. So that's why you are going to see, for example, tadrusu. Tadrusu. From tadrusu. From tadrusu, the formation will come from tadrusu. From tadrusu means ta will drop. Alif will come in the beginning instead of ta. And the second letter, because it's already sakin, tadrusu, ta is already sakin. Okay? So alif will come in the beginning, and you are going to see the second letter. If second letter is madhmu, means with dhamma, alif will have dhamma. and you are going to make sakin the end. What is the end? See. Udrus. You study. If you want to say you study, you are going to say udrus. And this is for masculine. Udrus. Udrusa for jewel. Udrusu for 3. Okay? Or more than 3 for plural. Udrus, udrusa, udrusu. For example, ijlis, ijlisa, ijlisu. Same thing. Make amr. Okay? From tadrib. Mr. Shabi.
Yes.
From tadrib. Make the amr. Tadrib. So first, what you are going to tadribu. So what you are going to say, what you are going to do first?
You put alif.
No, first what we are going to do? Remove the
Ta.
ta. And what will come?
Sorry.
Alif will come in the beginning.
Adri.
Alif will come. And if the second letter has E, means maksur, kasra, it says kasra. So second letter, this ra is second letter after this one. Okay, the first is dad and second is ra because of tadribu. Okay, so ta is dropped. This remains da ra ba. So this one is already sakin. So what you are going to do? The ra is maksur, alif will come, will have kasra, and then you are going to make sakin. Ba, idrib, hit, idrib, idriba, idribu. Idrib, idriba, idribu. Idrib, idriba, idribu. Is this okay? For masculine one? Okay. Give me the simple one. For example, from taktubu. From taktubu, make am. From taktubu.
Aktub.
Uktub, 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 uktuba, uktubu, uktub, uktub. Okay, make amr from tasma. Huh? Tasma. Always. Always. If it is the second letter has u, alif will have dhamma. If second letter is madmum, alif will have dhamma. If second letter is maksur or maftur, means with kasra or with fatha, alif will have kasra. So tasma'u, then isma. Isma. The last letter is going to be maksur anyway.
Okay.
Last letter is going to be what you call sakin. Isma.
The second letter is ma. You say tasma.
If second letter is maftu or maksur. For example, we are going to see from tasma'u. 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 Okay, so what we are going to do? We are going to drop the ta. Okay? And then what second letter got here? Maftu. After seeing it, the first one and the second letter, mim. Mim has fatha, means maftu. Okay? So alif will come, is, and the end will have sakin. Isma. It's a very famous wording when we recite talqeen. What do we say? When we recite talqeen. Have you heard about anyway, talqeen? When we put the
then we say the name.
yes, name. For example, Hussein. Oh, Hussein, son of so and so. Oh, who said Isma? We say Isma, listen. Isma, listen. Isma. And say Ifham. Isma. So that's what I'm saying. We command. We say Isma, listen. So this one is from Tasma'u Isma. Isma. Isma'a. Isma'u. Now this is for masculine. 3 for masculine. Now 3 for feminine, and then Shabaru take over. So we form the Amr from Tadrusu. Always, Amr is going to be formed from Tadrusu, means the masculine for present. Masculine present. Now we are going to see for same thing. What about feminine present? From Darasa. Feminine. Tadrusina. Ahsan. Tadrusina. Ahsan. Tadrusina. Tadrusina. You are studying. You are talking to a female. You are. When you are, for example, Zainab, you are going to say, Zainab, Tadrusina, you are studying. Okay? So, from Tadrusina, you are going to make a form Amr. So, what is the main thing is?
Remove the tag.
Remove the ta.
Udrusin.
And then
Udrusin.
Then alif will come.
Yeah.
Okay.
Noon sakit.
Because ya is already sakin. Ya is C. Look, C. C is turning into ya. Ya is already sakin. So what you are going to do? You are going to drop the noon. And this ya will get bigger. Udrusi. From Tadrusina, Udrusi. Udrusi. Udrisa. Same will come. Same. And then, what is that? Udrisna. Udrisna. Because Tadrusina, Tadrusani, Tadrusna. Yes, that's why. Udrusi. Udrisa. And then, same thing. For example, from Tajlusina. Tajlisina. You are sitting. You are sitting. Ta will drop. Alif will come in the beginning. And then what will happen? Nu will drop and ya will be Ijlisi. So, for masculine Ijlis, for feminine Ijlisi. That's why, for example, when you say from Tasma'u, Isma. And for Ismi'i. Am I right? Ismi'i. Why Ismi'i? No. Isma'i. Always you are going to see in the Amr, ya will come. Idlisi, Idribi, you hit. Okay? And then, for example, say just Shariba, Yashrabu. That means Tashrabu, Tashrabina. What is going to be Amr? Ishribi. Ishrib for male. For female, Ishribi. Ishribi, Ishriba, Ishribna. So, it got only 6. Udrusi, Udrisa, and then Udrisna. And then, same thing. For Udrus, Udrisa, Udrusu. So 14 for past tense, 14 for present tense and future tense, and 6 for amr. 6 for amr. Udrus, udrusa, udrusu, udrusi, udrisa, udrusna.
Sorry, udrisa.
Udrusa, udrusa. Because the original letter is tadrusu. Ra will have madhmum. So, udrus, udrusa, udrusu, udrusi, udrusa, udrusna. Shall I write here? All 6? So, udrus, ud, rus, ud, rusa, ud, rusu. Then come for family. Ud, rusi, ud, rusa, same. Ud, rusna. Udrusna. You may study, you two may study, and you 3 or more than 3 study for male. You female, udrusi, and you two female, udrusa, and you 3 or more than 3, udrusna. So this is sukun, 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 sukun. So inshallah, next week we are going to see more example, and then inshallah I'll conclude past tense, present tense, and amr all together. And then inshallah, from next week you are going to see little bit homework, so you are used to it, and what is how you are going to recognize past tense and present tense and amr. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, doctor? Can I sit here, sugar, for a while?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم والصلاة والسلام على محمد وآله وسلم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
باب هادي أشرف number 4. Last week, because I was not here, so we missed a session, which is why today is slightly longer. But as we have therefore had 2 weeks of no lesson on theology, we'll have a quick recap. As you understand, we are still going through Al-Fasl Awwal based on Ma'rifatullah. I haven't given the Arabic before, there is a bit of confusion going through both the Arabic and English, but I'll give you some of the main Arabic words. We have spoken about واجب الوجود لذاته ممكن الوجود لذاته and امتناع الوجود وممتنع الوجود لذاته. We spoke about why we have said لذاته specifically, and we also spoke about the 5 qualities of the واجب الوجود لذاته, which will be found in your notes and which will also be found in our previous lesson, so I won't go through them again. Then we mentioned what we call the khawas, the specificities. So we did the khawas of wajib al-wujud lidhatih. Then we also spoke about the khawas of mumkin al-wujud lidhatih. And we said therefore afterwards that there are 2 ways within which we can have ithbat as-sani'. We can prove the creator, sani' meaning creator. We said that the first way, as was mentioned last time, is to look at the effects to understand the cause of those effects. And so we said in the way in which Nabi Ibrahim salamullah alayhi would look at the stars and the way in which they moved, and he would tell the atheists how did they move, etc., 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 or the star worshippers, who is the mover of these stars. Because if something is moving, there has to be someone to cause that movement. Then we mentioned that the second way of understanding or proving as-sani', the creator, is to categorize wujud into wajib and mumkin, and from there what connotations that has leads to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So last time we had our lesson, you had pages 11 and 12. I don't know if you still have that with you. And this time I have given 13 and 14. Just so that you remember, we also spoke about what we call mahiyya. Mahiyya being the form, the quality, we explained what that meant. We briefly also spoke last time about circular existence and tasalsul. We spoke about tasalsul and circular existence, and today they go into more detail about proving why is it necessary that tasalsul and circular existence, so regress and the chain of mumkinat as well as circular existence, is incorrect. So if we have page 12 and we look at point 31, just to recap what we did last time. Point 31. If I have a spare copy if we need one. Page 12, point 31. Among all the doctors, ulama, this is our translation, so they've translated the ulama as doctors. Among all the doctors, there are 2 ways of proving the creator, as-sani'. Number 1, first seeking for proof in the effects which need a cause for their existence, such as indicated in the Holy Quran. We will show them our signs in different horizons and among themselves till it becomes plain to them that it is the truth. So within the horizons you have the stars, etc., the way in which they move. This is an effect. What is the cause of that effect? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the way of Ibrahim al-Khalil, for he sought for proof in the setting of stars, which is disappearance, and that requires motion, and that requires becoming huduth, that requires change, and that requires a creator to cause that change. Point number 2, so that's the first way of proving as-sani', athbat as-sani'. Number 2, second, that one should speculate or understand about that which exists in itself, because mumtani'ul wujud, imtina, doesn't exist. Yes, it's part of the category, but it doesn't exist. So our interest is imkan and wujub. One can speculate about that which exists itself and divide it into the necessary, wajib al-wujud, and the possible. That division may bear witness to the existence of the necessary, from which proceed all of the possible existences which are separate from it. And there is a reference to this in that which is descended, that is the Quran, in the word of the Most High, is it not enough for thee that thy Lord is witness over all things? Allah is witness over all things. Allah is part of all things. In this chapter, the writer has referred to both ways at once. So this chapter, where we are looking at Faslul Awwal and Ma'rifatullah, he has spoken about both the first way and the second. He refers to the first in connection with his being powerful. So in this chapter comes the proof or the sifat of Allah's power. This is going to come in the future, that he'll talk about how Allah is powerful. Because someone who is powerful will then have an effect on the creation. As we've said, the first way is to look at the effect, to understand the cause of that effect. So Allah has to have an effect if He is powerful. So that's coming afterwards. What we're going to do here first, in this lesson, is to then look at necessary and possible and see what that means. If the necessary, in other words Allah, does not exist, then either a circle or an endless chain must follow. From now we will start the lesson. So, we are doing Ithbat al-Sani'. But just to make sure you haven't forgotten, what does the word mu'athir mean? Mu'athir. So the cause of effect. What does mujid mean? Mujid. Mujid. The bringer into existence. Mu'athir is the mover. Mujid is the bringer into existence.
Mu'athir is the mover.
Mover. And mujid is the bringer into existence. What is ihtiyaj? Ihtiyaj. Muhtaj, need. So the mumkin al-wujud has ihtiyaj, has need. Yes? And ma here we said are qualities or forms. So ithbat al-sani'. Proving the creator by categorizing wajib and mumkin. Now he says, so we understood that we have one is wajib al-wujud. If we take the wajib al-wujud to not exist, then that will mean one of two things. So if this does not exist, then it is lazim, it is necessary that either we have dawr or we have tasalsul. So, if wajib al-wujud is not present, if we for example take that there is no God, either we will go to look at dawr, circular existence, or tasalsul, regress, the chain of existence. Now what we're trying to do here is we're trying to prove that both dawr and tasalsul is muhal, is impossible. What he mentions first. He says both of these are false. So dawr and tasalsul is false, but why? Now he says one thing, I want people to understand this. We have one word called lazim, the other is malzoom. Lazim and malzoom. Lazim is necessary. Malzoom is that thing which has caused another thing to be necessary. So, dawr and tasalsul are lazim when there is no wajib al-wujud. Yes, when this is not there, these two are lazim. Therefore, what is malzoom? What has caused those other two to become lazim? The absence of this. Malzoom is that thing which causes another phenomenon to become lazim. In this case, we have said if wajib al-wujud does not exist, then dawr and tasalsul are lazim. Therefore, malzoom is the absence of the wajib al-wujud. Does that make sense? lazim, necessary. We have said if wajib al-wujud is not there, dawr and tasalsul are lazim. Malzum is that thing which causes something else to become lazim. So what has caused these two to become lazim? The absence of wajib al-wujud. He says, if dawr and tasalsul, the lazim, is impossible, then the malzum is also impossible. If this is impossible, then that means this is impossible. Because where else are we going to go? We have three options. Either this, either number one, number two, number three. If these two are impossible, this means that this is also impossible. The absence of wajib al-wujud is impossible because the lazim. So because lazim is muhal, is impossible, malzum is also impossible. In other words, it's impossible to have no wajib al-wujud because the other two options don't work. Yes? Then he says, that we have mahiyat. So we mentioned mahiyya, and that should be a notice of what mahiyya is. So he's trying to prove why dawr and tasalsul are not true. And we've spoken a bit about it last time. So we have mahiyat. We have forms, we have quantities. They can either be they can either have imkan, so they can either be possible, or they can have wujub, necessary. So we have these forms which are related into the physical world. So for example, we could have the form of the table, we could have the form of the chair, we could have the quantity and the mahiyya of the color red, we could have the mahiyya of a pen. All of these mahiyat, plural, that we have, can either be possible or necessary. If we have the possible, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for the possible, for the necessary. However, if we have all of these mahiyat to be on the level of imkan, what happens? Stay with me, you understand. If some of one of these mahiyya is wajib al-wujud, this is what we want. However, if they are all mumkin al-wujud, what will happen? If all of these mahiyat are mumkin al-wujud, then they will all, if none of them are wajib al-wujud, they will all be mumkin al-wujud. So let's say all of these mahiyat are mumkin. They are possible. If they are all possible, so all of these existences, don't get confused by mahiyat, all of these existences are possible. If they are all possible, what do they require? They are all possible. They require a mover, al-mu'athir, because as we've said, mumkin al-wujud is muhtaj, has ihtiyaj al-mu'athir. So if all of our mahiyat are mumkin al-wujud, this must mean that we have a al-mu'athir. Because they need something to bring them into existence. If none of them are wajib al-wujud, which brings them into existence, they have to have al-mu'athir. So then we ask the question. That we have these existences. We have, for example, this, 2. Both of these are mumkin. Therefore, they require al-mu'athir. So now we have al-mu'athir. Now, what is this al-mu'athir? Is this al-mu'athir wajib al-wujud? If the al-mu'athir is wajib al-wujud, then this is what? This is Allah. We don't need to go any further. However, now he says that if this mu'athir is mumkin al-wujud, then it itself needs a mu'athir. Because as we said, all mumkin al-wujud require mu'athir, require a mover to bring them into existence. If these two had this mover, but this is also mumkin, it requires a mover. If the mover of this is wajib al-wujud, then this makes sense, this is Allah. However, if the mover of this is in actual fact this, then what do we have? What type of existence is necessary in the first place? What he's trying to say is if we have no wajib al-wujud in this chain, either you'll have dawr or tasalsul. He's trying to prove the first. How is it necessary that if you don't have wajib al-wujud, you'll have dawr? He's saying either the existence can go in a circle or it can go in a chain. So if we have no wajib al-wujud in the picture, what two options do we have? Dawr or tasalsul. There is no third option. That's what he's trying to show. So he's saying we can have A, B, C, is al-mu'athir of the two, and he came back. So this is the al-mu'athir, this is also mu'athir. We mentioned last time, why does this not work?
There would have been a time when A didn't exist in the first place.
Why?
Because A was mumkin al-wujud, and C is also mumkin al-wujud. So if A didn't exist, how can C exist then before it?
So one thing will have to be dependent and independent at the same time. One phenomenon will have to be dependent and independent on the same time. So C is the bringer about of B. Therefore, it needs to be independent. However, it's also dependent on A. What this means is that one phenomenon will have to exist and not exist at the same time. One phenomenon will have to exist and not exist at the same time. So it will have to be mawjood and ma'doom, the absence of this, at the same time. Because it is both the cause and the effect. So it has to be present and not existing at the same time, which is of course impossible. Does this make sense? So, if I wanted to define dawr, I would say it means how would we define dawr? How would we define circular existence? How do we define circular existence? If we go to point 34, read point 34, then it should make sense. Point 34, maybe I'm ahead. So point 34. In explanation of this first matter, we understand that there are quiddities, ma'iyat, which are qualified by objective existence of necessity. What does this mean? Objective existence of necessity means we have ma'iyat, which have their physical representatives. As I said, mahiyya does not always have to be physical. We are saying that there are mahiyat which have their own physical shadows. In other words, we have existence in the physical world. If the necessary exists along with them, then that is what we are seeking. If we have mahiyat and there is the wajib al-wujud present there in these existences, then that makes sense. If it does not exist, then it becomes necessary that all these quiddities are possible, because there's no wajib al-wujud, they're all going to be possible. In this case, all of the quiddities must then have a mu'athir, have a mover. If this mover then is the necessary, that's what we're trying to show. So if A came from B, and B's mu'athir is the necessary existence, then that makes sense. You came from your parents and they came from whatever, at the end of the chain is Allah. However, if it is the possible, so if the mu'athir of B is also a mumkin wujud, then it needs to have a mover. If the mover of C is then A, we have circular existence, it results in a circle. Okay? However, we can also have this, that instead of going back to A, it goes to D and E, and so on. So this way will be tasalsul, this way will be dawr. So he's trying to show that without wajib al-wujud, either you have this option or you have this option. There's no other options. Now, why are they both incorrect? Point 35. In explanation of the second matter, namely the fallacy of the circle, why door is incorrect, we say that a circle means the dependence of a thing upon something which in turn depends on it. I depend on something which depends on me. I depend on something. That same thing depends on me. Therefore, I have to exist and not exist at the same time. A circle means that the dependence of a thing upon something which in turn depends on it. As for example, that A should depend on B and B on A. And this is a fallacy, for it would then be necessary that the first thing should be both existing and non-existing at the same time, and this cannot be true. For when A depends on B, then A is dependent on B, and all of which that B depends. So A depends on B, therefore it also depends on C, because C causes A. Therefore, if this depends on this, it depends on this, and this depends on this, how does it work? It doesn't make sense. Because if A depends on B, it will depend on everything which B depends on. Does that make sense? For when A depends on B, then A is dependent on B and all which B depends, as we've said. And among the things which B depends is A. Why? Because if we say A depends on B, therefore it depends on this, but it also depends on A itself. Does that make sense? Why? So A depends on B, therefore it has to depend on all of the things which cause B itself. What causes B? C and A. Therefore A has to depend on itself. Whatever depends on itself has to be before that. Whatever depends has to come before. So for example, a plant depends on the sun. It cannot be that the plant came first. The sun has to come before this. In the same way, if A is dependent on itself, then A has to come before itself. Does that make sense? Is that possible? No. That is why Dawr does not work. Dawr is batil. Dawr is ma'ad. Dawr is impossible. Because we say that when A depends on B, it depends on all of the things that B depends on. Therefore, depends on B. If A depends on B, it also depends on C, and it also depends on A itself. Whatever is dependent on something, that thing has to come before it. So the plant depends on the sun has to come before it. If A depends on itself, it has to precede itself, and this is impossible. Now if you can just understand that in some way. I think we have also some Arabic terminology which may help. Okay, I'll explain in this way. We have الموقوف عليه and الموقوف. These were the consonants. الموقوف عليه is that on which something depends. That on which something depends. So can someone give me an example if they've understood the definition? That al-mawquf alayh is that on which something depends. Give me an example of al-mawquf alayh. So what will be mawquf alayh? That on which something depends. For example, for me, oxygen. I depend on oxygen. So oxygen is al-mawquf alayh. In the example of the plant, the sun is mawquf alayh. Oxygen is mawquf alayh. What is mawquf? The thing which then depends on that other thing. How have they written it here? So mawquf is the dependent, And mawquf alayh is that on which something depends. For example, the plant, example, and mawquf alayh, the sun. So when we say A depends on B, so mawquf alayh is B, that means it also has to depend on C, but it also has to depend on A itself. Therefore, A is al-mawquf alayh and al-mawquf together, and we have said that al-mawquf alayh has to precede al-mawquf. How can it therefore be that A precedes itself is mu'al? Does that make sense? Or is there confusion? Does it make sense? So here he has proved that when we do not have wajib al-wujud, hypothetically, there's only two ways we can go. Either we can go in a circle or we can go in a chain. We've shown that the circle does not make sense because something has to exist and not exist at the same time. It will be mawquf and mawquf alayh, one existence, and mawquf alayh precedes mawquf. Therefore, one existence will have to precede itself, which is not possible. The second is what then? Tasalsul. What have they written in there? Let's finish point 35, so we just have read it. And the explanation of the second matter, namely the fallacy of the circle and the chain, we say that a circle means the dependence of a thing upon something which in turn depends on it. For example, A should depend on B and B then on A, and this is a fallacy of necessity. In other words, it is definitely untrue. Fallacy of necessity means it is definitely batil. The English is maybe confusing. For it would then be necessary that the first thing should both exist and not exist at the same time, and that cannot be. For when A depends on B and then A is dependent on B and all on which B depends, among the thing which B depends is A, because it's a circle. Therefore A must depend on itself, and that which precedes. Therefore A must depend on itself, and that on which something depends precedes that which depends on it. Therefore, if I depend on oxygen, it cannot be that I am present and oxygen is not there. Oxygen has to precede me. If the plant is dependent on the sun, it cannot be that the plant comes first. Mawquf alayh has to come first. So A has to come in front of itself, before itself. And that which precedes, by the fact that it precedes, comes into existence before that which follows. So in this case, A comes into existence before itself, as we've understood. Hence, it is both existent and non-existent at the same time, and that is impossible, as we have seen. The second option that can happen is tasalsul. Tasalsul is an endless chain within which you have an arrangement of causes and effects in such a way that each one which precedes is the cause of the one which follows. So here there's an interesting rule about tasalsul. We've understood mawquf alayh and al-mawquf. That in tasalsul, how it works, the chain of these mumkinat, is that each one which precedes has to have caused the other. So for example, we have this chain. This will have caused this, which will have caused this. This does not have any effect on C. B is the reason why C is there, C is the reason why D is there. So they each have a chain. An endless chain is the arrangement of causes and effects in such a way that each one which precedes is the cause of the one which follows. Each one which precedes is the cause of the one which follows. And so on. And this also is incorrect for all the individual links of this chain, which include all possible existences. So if they are all mumkinat, what do they require? If they are all mumkinat, they require al-mu'athir. Because as we said, possible, why? Why do they require al-mu'athir?
Because they won't exist at one time.
Why do they require al-mu'athir though?
Because they are all dependent.
Because as we have said when we spoke about khawasul mumkin, they are like a scale where dependent existence and non-existence is 50%, if you remember. So wujud and its adam are 50-50. So to move one, to increase one in percentage requires a mover. Because existing and non-existent is completely equal. So if we have this chain, this tasalsul, all of them are mumkinat, then that means they have to have al-mu'athir. Now with regards to al-mu'athir, there are three options, which logically we understand. Hence they need a mover. And their mover, if we change the page to page 14, and their mover is either themselves, or a part of themselves, or something else. فمؤثرها إما نفسها أو جزءها أو الخارج عنها. The mu'athir of this chain is either it's themselves, they themselves are mu'athir, or part of them is mu'athir, or we have an external mu'athir. So the three options we can have with regards to tasalsul when we have a chain of mumkinat is that either the mu'athir is themselves, they themselves are the movers of themselves, or they are a part of them is mu'athir, or it is external. Now he goes on to show how all three of these are incorrect. And all of these alternatives are absolutely incorrect. First, it is impossible for a thing to be moved by itself. So if we take the first one, where the mu'athir is itself, it is impossible for a thing to be moved by itself. For otherwise it would be necessary for it to precede itself, and this is a fallacy as was proved above. So if A here moves itself, A has moved itself and caused this movement. Therefore it is al-mawquf alayh. Mawquf alayh is A itself. Because it is dependent on its movement. It is therefore mawquf alayh and mawquf. This cannot be possible. Because then it will have to precede itself, which is muhal, as we've seen in the previous example. So we've understood why the first one is incorrect. That the mu'athir is itself. First, it is impossible for a thing to be moved by itself, or otherwise it would be necessary for it to precede itself, and this is a fallacy as we have proved above. And the second is impossible because if the mover of them be a part of them, so if it is a part, the second option is a part, if the mover of them be a part of them, then it becomes necessary for a thing to be a mover of itself, because it is also that thing. So if we are saying that we have all of these chains, and part of it is the mover, part of it, for example, this part is the mover, this has caused the movement, then this is also within this chain. Therefore, again, it will have to move itself, and if it moves itself, as we have shown, it is impossible. So if we have this chain of tasalsul, part of it is al-mu'athir. If it is a part, it is still part of the chain. It has to therefore move itself. If it has to move itself, it has to precede itself. As we have shown, mawquf alayh mawquf, preceding itself cannot be possible. So the second is also impossible. Yes? And the second is impossible because if the mover of them, the units of the chain, be a part of them, then it becomes necessary for a thing to be the mover of itself, because it, the mover, is also one of these causes. It's a number in the chain. So then it will have to move itself, and that is impossible as we have seen previously. And with regards to the third alternative, the proof of this being incorrect is of two kinds. So the first alternative was al-mu'athir is itself. The second, seen why the number one is incorrect. And why number 2 is incorrect. Now, why is number 3 incorrect? And the proof of the fallacy of this third alternative is of 2 kinds. First, that this thing, so if we are saying so we have seen that this chain, we have al-mu'athir, and this is external. This has caused this movement. So this causes this movement for this chain to take place. The first reason why this does not work, the thing external to them, in other words this al-mu'athir which is external, must be wajib, must be necessary, since it is presupposed that all possible existences are united in this chain and there remains no external entity except the necessary. So if this chain exists, we've said that it has to have a mover because they are all mumkinat. If it has a mover within, which is itself, this cannot be possible as we've seen. If it is a part of itself, this is also impossible because it will have to have moved itself. If it is external, then if this is wajib, then this is Allah. If al-mu'athir is external, it has to be wajib for the chain to go. Otherwise, if it is not wajib, then the chain will be there. If it is wajib, then this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what we are trying to show. The first thing. Second, if the mover of each single individual of the links of the chain be something external to them, then 2 independent causes would have to unite in producing one single effect. What does this mean? So, al-mu'athir caused A to move. It's also caused B to move. It's also caused C to move. Now, if al-mu'athir has caused B to move, we have said that A has to cause B to move. So al-mu'athir has caused A to move. A moves. What we have said, if the chain works, A has to move and push B. But mu'athir is also pushing B. So you have 2 things here. 2 pushes, 2 movements. 2 movements cannot then have one effect. They have to have 2 effects. But we have said the chain works in this way. That this, for example, you have example of tasalsul. So
like everything is from atom.
So if, for example, we have plants, okay, which came from seed, which came from
Flower.
an element, let's say. Elements came from, and it goes and it goes and goes and goes and goes on. We understand that this causes this, movement causes the existence, which causes this. If we have something external, then we have then 2 movements. We should only have one to cause this chain. And 2 movements cannot then turn into one. That doesn't work. So this then does not work. The system does not work.
But what about al-mu'athir? It is independent.
Al-mu'athir is independent, but al-mu'athir will move each one of these. Yes? And we have said that each one which precedes has to be the cause of what comes after it. So this has to be the cause of this. If mu'athir is causing this and this, we have 2 then. So the plant then, is it caused by mu'athir and the seed? It can't be. Because then we have 2 movements. And 2 movements then would have to be turned into one. But this cannot happen.
It means 2 mu'athir. 2 mu'athir is wajib.
And the other. If we have said, excuse me, al-mu'athir is external, and we have said the chain logically shows that what precedes it has to cause it. If mu'athir is also causing B to move, but we have said B has to be moved by A, if we have two movements, and two movements cannot be turned into one.
I mean, suppose we say we do not need moisture, yeah? He can move B, why we need moisture?
Externally.
Yeah.
So then we have shown that if we do not have mu'athir, how will A move? We don't have this external mu'athir. How does A move? How does it just come out of movement? Is it moving itself? We've proved that it cannot move itself. Is it part of it which is causing the movement? We've proved that. The only third one is this kharij, and even this doesn't make sense. Because A will be moved by al-mu'athir. Al-mu'athir will also move B. But we have said B has to be moved by A. By move we mean bring into existence.
If al-mu'assir work only for A, and A period chain, then
this is what we call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we said in the first point. So if we take al-mu'athir to only affect A, then this is Allah. Because
Allah can affect on B as well. Right.
But if that happens, then we'll have two. But we're not talking about Allah here in the second option. When we talk about both of these, we say if we have another mu'athir. We've already broken down the argument by saying mu'athir has to be wajib.
The mu'athir can affect A and B both.
Yes, but what it says here, if we read. First, the thing external to them must be necessary, since it is presupposed that all possible existences are united in this chain, and there remains no external entity except the necessary. For there is no middle ground between the necessary and the possible. Hence our conclusion, it has to be wajib, because these are all mumkinat. Therefore we say this is one. Secondly, if the mover of each single individual of the links of the chain be something external, so then we can take like this. So mu'athir of A, then we have a mu'athir of B, then we have a mu'athir of C, then we have mu'athir of D.
Then it's not possible.
Then it's not possible.
But
if we have one mu'athir which causes A, then causes the chain, then this makes sense.
And if moisture work for A, for B, and for C, and for D, then it's possible or not possible?
If mu'athir causes, then one mu'athir.
One moisture.
Yes, then it's possible.
Then possible. Yeah?
If we have it like this, there's a bit of confusion. If we have it like this, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because then you have two movements.
Yeah. But if there is only
one
movement, and one movement is because of
mu'athir,
then it's
this
possible.
is work. And for example, we have the atom here, and the mu'athir was Allah. And that makes sense. But if each mu'athir is different,
So
each causes its own movement, then we won't have a chain.
Yeah.
necessarily exists.
Because you have two movements.
It's not possible.
As has written. If the move of each single individual of the links of the chain be something external to them, then two independent causes would have to unite. So the cause of D would be both this and this. They would have to come together to have one effect, and that cannot occur. These two independent causes would have to unite in producing one single effect, and this is a fallacy. For the supposition was that each of the links of the chain be the mover of the one that follows. But according to this alternative, it has been supposed that each link there be an external moving. Then these two causes would have to unite in producing one single effect. This cannot be, otherwise it would have to be independent of the two causes in spite of its being in need of them both. These two contradictions would have to agree, and that is impossible. Hence the endless chain is absolutely false. So the fallacy of both the circle and the endless chain has been demonstrated. How both daw and tasalsul do not make sense. So this is now a completion of this Fasl al-Awwal on Ma'rifatullahi Ta'ala. So now we have completed Fasl al-Awwal on Ma'rifatullahi Ta'ala, as well as the Muqaddamah that we did.
Is there any question for this?
Yeah. I mean, that's we understand that something is coming from something else. Yeah. But at the end, as a suppose as an atheist gonna ask that how the Muassar come from? I mean, how the Allah come from? Then, I mean, everybody comes like plant come by seed and seed come by element or whatever. And who produced the element? We say God. So who created the God?
But that's why we said that you have to have somewhere in the chain a stop. You have to have one thing which causes everything else and which cannot be caused itself. Why? Because we've shown why it has infinite regress. So I had a continuous number of chains. D, E, F, G, H, Z, A number 2, A number 3, etc. We have continuous. We understood why this does not work. Have we understood that? Why this infinite regress does not work? Therefore, there has to be something. If this does not work, there has to be something which begins the chain, but it itself is independent.
How are you gonna prove this?
Because logically we have the proof of this. So we have this chain of causation. We have this chain of causation. It goes on, it goes on, it goes on. Continues. No stop. Why have we said that this is impossible? Explain to me why tasalsul, infinite tasalsul, is impossible. Explain.
Because we exist, therefore it's impossible. If, let's say, I was cause number 1 billion, that proves that there has to be a first one.
Because if there is no beginning, there is no cause. I gave the example, if you remember last time, you have an infinite number of people in a line for a race.
Yeah.
I will only run when the person to my left runs. He will only run when the person to his left runs. If we have infinite number, no stop, no one will begin running. You have to have a stop. And that person has not to have to depend on his person on the left. He has to be the last person. So that when he runs, the second runs, the third runs. So in this chain, you have to have one, logically, for it to work, a chain to work, you have to have one which begins, which causes and is not dependent. So you have to have one stop here. Because if you don't, then it doesn't make sense. So the atheist will say, look, we have infinite regress. But we have shown infinite regress doesn't make sense. In order for a chain to make sense, if you want to take chain, then you have to have a beginning. That beginning should not be dependent itself. Because if it's dependent, what is it dependent on? If it's dependent on something else, then we have that regress again. There has to be a start point. We say that start point of existence, we call it Allah. This is what we say. Logically we have said this. Logically we said that existence is either wajib and mumkin. Logically. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Any other questions?
Can you explain please again why the two movements for the Muassar cannot be combined into one?
So,
And we might be thinking like that before Allah there is some Allah. Why don't we think like this?
Then Allah is not Allah.
No. Of course, for our, we know what is Allah.
Before Allah, if some Allah is.
Then how would we know that? The start point is from Allah. There might be one of them is before that. How you can say?
So this one, who is before that Allah, this one can't be Allah.
So
If we think, okay, the third one is Allah, but before third one there is one more. So this third one can't be Allah. Because if we say the third one is Allah, that means he is dependent. And Allah must not be dependent.
but these are like old assumptions.
It's a logic. It's a logic.
Logic has to.
For example, if we say that everything is being created from the earth, Okay? So Earth,
We normally say everything is created by water. Is written in the Quran.
for example, let's say, okay, Earth is from where? Earth is from Sun. So it was a part of the Sun, and million and billion years ago, it was separated. Okay? Now, the Sun is from what? Sun is from atom. Now the atom, everything, now go back, there's water and human and plants and animal, everything, whatever we see or whatever we are going to see, everything is from atom. The first is atom. Okay? Now the question here, atom is from what?
Yeah. But the thing is that our intellectual is like stop at that point.
So we are not going to find, if we are going to keep asking, okay, we are not going to find a creator. If we are going to keep asking, this is from that and that is from this, and we are going to just continue, we are not going to find a creator. But the world is already been created. In physical world is already being created. If we are going to keep asking, we are not going to find a creator. But world is already existed. So what he's saying that this tasalsul is batil, is impossible. You have to stop somewhere. For example, you just take, for example, is very simple example. For example, number 10. What does it mean? 10 does not mean it's a 1 and 0. No. 10 means 10 things, whether it's 10 bottles or tables or book or pens. Because we can't, for example, if I want to say 10 pens, so I'm not going to bring 10 pens, then you are going to understand. So what I'm going to write a number. You just add it. 100, 1,000, million, billion. Okay? So what is that? For example, what is that means 9. Okay? 8, 7. You have to start somewhere. Okay? 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again I'm going to ask, what is before 1?
0.
Before 1 is nothing. Okay, if you keep 0 before 1, does not have any meaning. If you keep 0 after 1, it will give you meaning. Okay, so what I'm saying, numbers are here, but what is it before 1? How you are going to understand before 1? There must be someone before 1 who makes this 1. Because 1 cannot exist if there is nothing. Atom cannot exist itself. It does not have power. It does not have wisdom. It does not have knowledge. Atom cannot exist itself. So world is full of knowledge. It means we can't find the creator, but already world has been created. That means there is a creator. That's why this tasalsul is batil. Human mind cannot go and on and on and on, but there must stop somewhere, and that is the mu'athir final pause. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's continue.
In regards to why those two cannot work, because so if we have
the A and the B and the C chain, D, and each has a mu'athir, this mu'athir is independent. It's not linked with anything because we said it's kharij. And this movement is also this movement is independent from this movement. Yes, this movement they're not linked in any way. Therefore, we cannot have two independent causes to come together to cause one effect. Cannot come together to have one effect. Because they are independent. Because it's not like they are working together. This is kharij, this is completely different. And this is caused by this as well as this. So then because they are two independent, as he says here, if the mover of each single individual of the links of the chain be something external to them, then two independent causes would have to come together to unite in producing one effect. Two independent causes would have to come together to produce one effect, and this is impossible. Because mu'athir is, for example, causing movement this way.
If there is a two mu'athir, we can't say that these two are united. For example, one mu'athir want to create, for example, earth flat. And another mu'athir wants to create a different shape. If these two are united, and you said these two are, for example, they have same power, same knowledge, same age, it means they are not two, they are one.
That's why, you know the verse of the Quran, لو كان فيهما آلهة فسدتا.
Same quality, same thing. That means they are not two, they are one. And we are just
They are
one,
independent.
of course. That is our
Everything
argument.
in
This
this
is one.
world is linked. If they are independent, how can they then work together to
That's why two is not possible.
Because they have different, their effects are independent of each other. So their effects cannot be together. Effects can only be together when those two are interlinked. But because they are separate and individual, therefore their effects will be individual, so they cannot then combine together to have one joint effect.
And if they do, that means the dependent nature, so it's not a God.
Exactly. So this is therefore that fasl which we have finished on ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second fasl thani, is as-sifat al-thubutiyya. So if I can just have 5 minutes of your time just to give an introduction, then we stop. Instead of having a break 5 minutes and then so we can finish early.
So it's better to have, if you have a question or anything which you have understood, if you ask, then it will make a sense to you. That's why this is, why this is. So that's why Allah in the Quran says, two God is not possible, two mu'athir is not possible. So here mu'athir means the cause which created everything. So two mu'athir is not possible. You can't say two mu'athir.
So sifat thubutiyya.
Salbiyya.
As we know, sifat thubutiyya is positive attributes and salbiyya are negative attributes. Why is he mentioning these? He is mentioning these so that we can understand that the effects link back to the cause. So this is what we. So after mentioning ma'rifah of Allah, he will mention, for example, Allah is qadir, Allah has power. Because we have seen the effects of this, we have seen the movement of the stars. Only someone who is powerful can cause the movement of these stars. So this discussion is interlinked with ma'rifah. Thubutiyya, then he'll mention salbiyya, after that then they go into justice of God. But just generally as an introduction, on sifat, we'll get into sifat of the first, for example, there are many who will speak about these next week, but just as an introduction to sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala generally, as we understand, and as I may have mentioned before, ilm and power and life are not separate from his existence. When we mention khawasul wajib al-wujud li dhatihi, we said it being wajib, and it existing and it being necessary are not za'id. They are not added on. They are always part of the existence. So in the same way, if we have knowledge, it is always part. Allah is the source and ayn. Allah is knowledge. It's not that knowledge was added on or power was added on. He is the source of all knowledge, the source of all power. We cannot say that, for example, ilm was separate, and at one point Allah did not have it, then it came to its existence. And we've proven why that is not correct. Looking at sifat, we understand we have one which is sifat of essence, the second is sifat of action. Sifat of essence are those attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which always have to be manifest for Him to be God. And sifat of action are those that don't always have to be manifest. What does this mean? For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the attribute of living, of being hayy. This attribute always has to be manifest. He always has to show his living. He always has to be living. If that attribute is not manifest, then he will no longer be God. This is attribute of essence. But for example, the attribute of being the creator, khaliq, does this always have to be apparent from God? Because there was a time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not creator, but He was still God. He had the attribute of being creator within Him. Never has it been separate from Him. But it hasn't always been zahir, apparent. Because if He is not actually creating at one point, He's still God. But if He's not living at one point, then He won't be God. So attributes of essence are those attributes which always have to be manifest for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the deity. And attributes of action are those that don't always have to be manifest. They are within Him, but they don't always have to be manifest. Can someone give me another example of attributes of action? So khaliq or
Rahman.
mercy?
Yeah. There doesn't have to be anyone to have mercy on. At least it must.
And raziq, for example, because when no existence is there. What about attributes of essence? He always has to be living, for example. So this detail gets into more depth. Then we have those sifat, those attributes, which we have taken directly from ahadith. But then we also have contradictory to these are those attributes which we haven't taken from ahadith, but we have realized that they must be there. Logically, we have realized that Allah has to have this attribute. Those that have come from ahadith have told us definitely Allah, for example, has this attribute. But those that have not come directly are those attributes which we have understood logically that He has to, for example, have ilm, even though the narration may not tell us about this. So sifat, next week when we meet inshallah, we will begin by giving you a brief introduction to the sifat of Allah, other than thubuti and salbiyah. Positive and negative is one way of categorizing, but then you have essence and action. You have those from khabar and those not from khabar. You have jamal and jalal. What does this actually mean? So we start by looking at this, then we go in to look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is qadir, powerful, and mukhtar, how He has His own ikhtiyar, how He has His own will and choice. And we then prove why this is the case. Why does Allah have to be powerful? Why does Allah have to have His own choice? Is it a necessity? So then this discussion goes forward, and from there we will link it back to ma'rifah of Allah. After that, discussion on thubutiyya and salbiyya, then we reach the topic of adl. This is our fourth week or fifth week?
Fourth.
Fourth week. So we have 8 weeks left. So inshallah we can
Most probably we are going to cover it.
finish adl. And then we'll have nubuwwah, imama and ma'ad left. Because it's a bit philosophical, we're going a bit slowly. If there are any last questions before we finish. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you.